what you don't know, came out of that. Because if you don't know what's really going on or what you're losing, I mean, Neal, have you ever walked into a law firm or ever heard of a lawyer walking in and saying, tell me what we didn't sign today? Tell me the calls we got. Every lawyer
Right.
on the planet walks in and says, what did we sign today? That's knowing what we have. Where the gold is where we don't know what we have.
Law school taught you the law, but it didn't teach you this, how to connect. Be that one lawyer who shows up different, the one clients trust, the one they never forget. I'm Neal Goldstein, and this is That One Lawyer Podcast. Let's get started. Today's guest is a pioneer, a strategist, and one of the most influential figures in legal marketing over 45 years. Harlan Schillinger is often referred to as the grandfather of legal advertising, and for a good reason. He created the very first television commercials for attorneys back in the 1970s and has since helped over 130 law firms grow their brands, their intake systems, and their bottom line. He's not just an attorney icon, an industry icon. He's also a straight shooter who lives by the motto, no gimmicks, just results. He's the founder of the Golden Gavel Awards, co-developer of Lead Docket, and a fierce advocate for what he calls the ambassador of first impressions, the person in every law firm who answers that first call. What sets Harlan apart isn't just his experience, it's his integrity, accountability, and lifelong commitment to making law firms better from the inside out. He's someone who has helped shape the modern legal industry, and I'm honored to have him here today. Harlan, welcome to That One Lawyer Podcast.
Neal, thank you. I think I'm going to hire you for every opening that I have to do in the next 5 years. That was really humbling. I will tell you that I really appreciate that.
Okay, well, I'm open for that job. Anyway, I'm so glad to have you because Harlan, and everybody should know this, I met Harlan I'm thinking it's about 8 to 10 years ago at a John Fisher mastermind group. I think it was one of my first master groups that I attended. And the moment he started talking, I felt a real connection. And not just because we both come from New York and we both lived in a certain part of New York where I live now, out on Long Island. He just seemed like a real, authentic, genuine person that was willing to share. So, Harlan, it is an honor to have you here.
So I remember the very first day that I met you. I believe it was John Fisher's very first mastermind, if I'm not mistaken. And
yes,
quite frankly, when I heard your story and you began to talk, I was more enamored with you than anybody else in the room. When you got into your story about you not even finishing high school at the time and, aiding to, to the side of your mom, and it goes on and on. I just said to myself, this man is unreal. I mean, it's unbelievable what he has not only accomplished and how he went about it, but to this day, I'm still enamored by, your journey. I really, really am. We have a word between us that is very common. You're a mensch. Your mom obviously taught you very, very well, but to go through that life journey with you has not only been inspiring, it's humbling, but to be completely transparent, it's helped me more than it's helped you. I'm just telling you, my relationship with you is strong and bold because of what you've done and my admiration for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Those are very kind words. Obviously, I'm obviously enamored with you. I'm extremely honored to have your friendship, and I'm so excited that you're here, and so we can have this discussion. I'd like for the people, and my guess is that many of the people that are going to be listening to this are younger lawyers, and so I'd like for them to get your backstory, and you could start wherever it is comfortable for you, and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you started, and and you can end where you want.
I'm going to give you a very, very short version because if somebody wants to read more in depth, they can go to harlanschillinger.com. However, I started off in 1975. I got into the film business. I fell into it. I connected with a gentleman named Bill Meiskens, who was the executive creative director of creativity for J. Waller Thompson at the time. And he had an idea of syndicating high-end commercials. We were already doing the De Beers commercials, Noxema, Irish Spring, and he wanted to come up with a product called Retail Vision, which was taking a very high-end retail operation that's really not on sale and producing syndicated television commercials. One commercial that you could edit for different stores using, the product. In 1977, 76, I was watching the emergence of legal advertising, and I had an opportunity. We wanted to add a category. We were going to do funeral homes or lawyers. We spun the dice, and we came up with lawyers. And boy, it's been quite an adventure since then. So yes, I'm attributed to starting legal advertising. Len Jacoby from California, Jacoby and Myers, and New York were the very first people to ever advertise. I'll take second place behind Len any day. Len is a dear friend. I still talk to him, and I brought him into my National Trial Lawyers Advertising Hall of Fame. He was our first inductee. That's the elevator version. So, over the years, we got involved with legal advertising. You'd make a commercial, and where I literally learned your business was no matter what we put on television in 1980, really, by the time it got going, we couldn't get away from the phone calls. So we had to develop systems and how do you answer the phone? How do you do the business? And that's how I really got involved in the understanding and the mechanics of a law firm. We were thrown into the wind and we had to survive. Lo and behold, this really took ground and one thing led to another. And here we are today.
Yeah, my first job, actually before I passed the bar exam, while I was in school at night, I had to go to school at night because I couldn't afford to go during the day. So I went to New York Law School, and about 8 blocks away, I got a job with a guy named David Lee. And David Lee was 1-800-Lawyers. And I remember walking into the office, and he said, "Let me show you around." And the first thing he showed me was the room where all the answering machines were. And I almost had a heart attack. He had about 30 answering machines there, and every one of them on Monday morning, every one of them was full. Because at the time, he was, if not the only one of the few law firms in the New York metropolitan area that were doing commercials. 1-800-Lawyers, no better
he was
number than that.
He was a pioneer, and
yeah,
I never really bought into his brand because it was speed and greed. But on the other hand, I mean, he really was a pioneer. You couldn't get away with those 30 machines today.
No, not at all. But he absolutely did very well for himself, and maybe he had some issues, but him and his partner Bruce Davis certainly made their mark. So, there's so much to talk about when it comes to legal marketing. We're not going to have enough time to go over everything. So let me ask you this question, because ever since I've known you, you've always pushed lawyers to measure what matters: intake speed, conversion rates, actual results. But here's the thing. Most lawyers still don't know their numbers. So why is that? Is that denial or just old-fashioned ego, which I believe most lawyers are full of?
Well, it's a combination of things, and it's a great topic to start with. When I was telling you when we started, the phones rang off the hook. Things were falling off the plate. I mean, we couldn't keep up to it. Nowadays, the world has changed. But what lawyers seem to resist is accountability. They want to buy their way out of problems. They look at what they have. They don't look at what they don't have. And so about 20 years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I started to notice, that first of all, it was getting very competitive. We had to count what we were doing, and we had to pay attention to what we were doing. And lawyers weren't doing that. I started recording telephone calls and going back to my clients and saying, you're really not answering the phone well. You're letting business fall through your fingers. Again, Neal, I'm giving you the short version. And I really pushed for my own benefit, really, well, my clients' benefits, but for my agency's benefits, accountability. Let's figure out what's going on. And I started with intake. I started recording telephone calls. My clients came to me and said, give me more leads. And I said, what'd you do with the last ones? And they said, well, they're not any good.
Right.
I said, well, I don't believe that. Of course, we have an abundance of bad leads because the more you advertise, the more you're going to, generate bad calls.
Sure.
But I noticed they wanted to spend more money opposed to taking a look at what they're doing. And that's how it really began. I was protecting my agency, and the best way to protect your agency is to build your client's business. It led to a number of different things, and it also led to me developing with my two partners Lead Docket. But I'm adamant about accountability. In fact, I own I own a number of trademarks, as you know. What you don't know came out of that, because if you don't know what's really going on or what you'll lose it. I mean, Neal, have you ever walked into a law firm or ever heard of a lawyer walking in and saying, tell me what we didn't sign today? Tell me the calls we got. Every lawyer on the planet walks in and says, what'd we sign today? That's knowing what we have. Where the gold is where we don't know what we have.
Right. 100%. So, look, when I go out of New York and I go to the South or I go wherever it is in the Midwest, I see these giant billboards, and then I look at the morning TV shows and the commercials, and Harlan, they say the same damn thing that they've been saying for 50 years. No fee unless we win. We care about you. We love you. Insurance companies are afraid of us. But hasn't that just become white noise? How do lawyers break through the noise without turning themselves into walking billboards?
Well, yes and no. And one of the reasons I'll call it white noise, I'll use your term, is because people aren't really focused on lawyers until they need one. In fact, they don't like a lawyer until you need one. And so it's interesting. The most asked question on intake as of today, right now in your office, is how much is it going to cost me to do business with you? Now, in every ad that we've ever produced from 1980 on, we've said it's free to call, it's free to service. The call is free. And so it's the most used word, free, most important word, free, but people don't acknowledge it because they're not interested in talking or focusing on a lawyer. When you're in an accident, all of a sudden you're paying attention. Breaking through the noise, that's a whole conversation. I'm a true believer of doing the opposite of everybody else. Neal, I put together a video with about 4,000 television commercials on it for 5 minutes. It was 3 seconds a clip. And I remember presenting this. And when you go through it, it all sounds the same. I'm going to get you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get you. I got bigger elements than you. I got, $4 million, for a toenail that broke. And, and so on. And so, the very, very early on, I came to the conclusion, well, first of all, I understood the jury system and I understood how you approach trials. I was very blessed to work with some really interesting people. One of my most influential people was Melvin Belli and Howard Nations. And I'm going back, really back into the archives. And I watched trials, and I noticed that when a lawyer talks to a jury, they have to be likable. They have to have credibility. You get what you ask for, and so on. And so I took that strategy to heart, and I came up with my strategy of talking to the public the way you would a jury. Now, that separates you from a lot of people.
100%.
And you have to tell a story. My friend Jerry Spence taught me, tell a story, read all my books. And I did. And consequently, I also got tuned into, you get what you ask for. So if I'm asking for a soft tissue case, that's what I'm going to get. If I say I do serious injuries, everybody says that. So you have to talk to the jury in a sincere way. And that's been my strategy since the beginning. And by golly, I'm double down on it now.
You mentioned Melvin Belli. My ex-wife worked for Aaron Broder in New York, who was Melvin Belli's partner. He was, I think I could say this now, he's gone, but he wasn't a very nice he wasn't a very nice guy. But when he was in front of a lawyer, in front of a jury, he had them crying. Why did he have them crying? Because he talked to them as if they were all sitting around a kitchen table and he was telling them a story about somebody, and he made them feel like we're all in this together and this is what happened to somebody. I try to do that honestly when I meet my clients. You said, you talked about intake. One of the first things I do when I see a client, I don't ask them anything about the case. I first ask them, tell me something about yourself. And they step back and they say, "Oh, they weren't expecting that." And then all of a sudden, 70% of the time that I'm with them, and it's usually a few hours, it's talking about something that has nothing to do with the case because we're building something. And I try to tell that to young lawyers. You have to make that connection. And of course, we live in a digital age. And I guess that brings me to the next question, which is, it's a lot of answers to this, but you know, we have to try, we have no choice, Harlan. We have no choice but to try and marry or integrate digital with authenticity. Unfortunately, most people don't know how to do it. They probably at this point lean more, at least the younger people, towards digital. And the older group of people like me, probably, and I don't do this, but people my age generally lean away from digital. Any advice on the idea of marrying both of them?
Well, I approach digital the same way as I approach anything else. Number one, the biggest thing that's missing is compassion. So lawyers get on the phone, and all I want to do is know if they got a case or not. Well, who's that about? It's about the lawyer, not about the client. Every day my wife when we wake up, every day, Neal, she says to me, I want you to be interested, not interesting. And, that's a very interesting philosophy. So when you get on the phone with a client and you're asking something about them other than, you got an accident that you can take to me, that's compassion. I mean, listen to intake. It's unbelievable. I've listened to thousands of intake and people don't ask questions. Well, what's the accident? When was it? This person is calling it the worst day of their life.
Right.
And they need help. And all we want to know is, you got something for me? It's when my father used to tell me, rest his soul, every time I saw him, he said, nobody gives a shit how much money you have when you die. You're going to be judged by how you treat people. And again, that falls back to how I met you and the impression you gave on me. So I'm not surprised that you take that approach. But think about it. How do you want to be treated? What makes you different than anybody else? I personally believe that 90% of the lawyers out there suck. And they do it because it's a money grab. They're in it for themselves. They have no compassion for the client. Now, I don't know. I've been told I'm qualified to say that, but that's not the kind of lawyer I want to work with. Certainly the kind of lawyer I don't think you want to hire. And so then the question comes, so, well, how do you find who you want to work with, and how do you make a decision, and how do you hire a lawyer? A client of mine just published a book, and we both came up with the title. It's never been easier to hire the wrong lawyer for your case. All of what you're saying really falls into communication and dignity and how you want to communicate with people. So is it about you or is it about me?
I have been criticized, and I've mentioned this a number of times because I think it's important for people to know. I have been criticized by my brethren, some of them you may very well know, who say I've spent too much time with clients, that I talk to them too long, that I should delegate that to a paralegal or to an investigator, God forbid. And, all these talking heads that tell me how I should take apart the time that I'm using foolishly and dish it out to other people. But aren't we at the point, Harlan, where personal brand is becoming more important than corporate brand? That especially in a moment of social media, which we can't dismiss. We can't. It's there. It's going to be there for as long as I'm around. So we have to either try to deal with it or not. So isn't personal branding, and for me, it's about personal branding, isn't that important?
It's major. I mean, people want to deal with people that they like and they trust. But, I'm not going to leave out the corporate, brand, because you can have that with a corporate brand, but you have to have the DNA of compassion and communication. Are you a mill? Well, a mill isn't going to talk to anybody. Are you a lawyer that's looking for quality business and referral business? Again, it's how you treat people. Now, there is some validity. Sometimes we talk way too long on the phone. Maybe you can cut it down. Who knows? But I would never give up the personality and the personal approach that you take, because that's how people feel. You have a quality practice more so than a big volume practice. And so I believe, and I'm using you as an example, you have a very high referral rate. And it's because they treat people, and people want to be treated well. Now, there is, again, validity to the length of the call, but I don't want to get into that. I really rather dispute the compassion and giving it to somebody else. Now, I also do believe in having an intake department, but I believe in having them trained. Now, keep in mind, when somebody answers the telephone for you, they are an extension of you. So why should it be any different than the way you want to handle it and your personality? It's more of a rhetorical question, but think about that. You hired somebody to represent you, Neal, and if they're not representing you, just like a lawyer doing work, then that's not the right person for you, in my opinion. But you're going to win this war. Everybody's going to win this war with compassion, with treating people well. And I can assure you, with this philosophy, my clients have done extremely well in this world. I mean, I can tell you, I've worked with, some pretty savvy lawyers. I mean, Mark O'Mara down in Orlando is pretty savvy. He's a big guy. He takes time to talk to people on the phone. Mark Garagos, he's got his hands full this week. If you call his firm, he's going to take as much time as you need with him. Now, he's one of the finest criminal lawyers on the planet. But what is he doing differently than the ambulance chaser down the street? He's being a human being. And the most important thing is he is living within the contract that he signed, that they signed, that you signed, and everybody else signed when they became a lawyer. I have never met a lawyer in my life, I'm only doing this 50 years, 49 and a half years, that ever read that after they signed it. But if you read that and you simply do that, you will do very well as a lawyer.
On top of that, I would add to what you're saying, and I agree 100%. That's what this podcast is all about. But on top of that, I would make the argument that from an ethical point of view, where you have to zealously represent your client, I think it's vital to have that real, authentic relationship with your client. You have to know who your client is. You have to know what their wants are, their desires are. You can't just say, okay, I'll be with that client for an hour. Now I know who that person is. You have to really understand who they are. And I think a lot of lawyers don't think that way. They think of it as purely transactional.
Well, yes, that is the big word, transaction. If you simply read, I encourage anybody that's listening to this to simply go to the internet, type in, ethical oath when you become a lawyer in your state. It's one paragraph.
Right.
Read it and live by it, because it is an ethical consideration to show, and I believe the word compassion is in there, and a zealous representation. We touched on Mel. Mel was a cranky guy. He was a difficult guy. He was very nice to me. I've seen him in action in a number of different ways. I'm good friends with his son, Caesar. And I will tell you this, he got to know his clients. Every good lawyer that I know, great lawyer that I know, the 10% out of the bar, there's a lot, gets to know their lawyer. And then the competitors wonder, how do they get those cases? How do they get those big cases? My partner, Tammy Kay, who now owns Network Affiliates, my past agency, I always watched her answer this question. How do I get the good case? Everybody wants the big case. Well, you can hang a shingle out and say, I'm a truck lawyer, and you're not. Or you can say, I get the big case. And her answer is, be a good lawyer, which is an interesting answer. Be a good lawyer. Being a good lawyer is being a good human being and being a professional. And the professionals, the big hitters, consistently, whether it's I can go down Howard Nixon, John Romano, all the great lawyers that I know.
Right.
Every one of them thinks like you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm in good company, but I've always thought that way. It's not something that, I don't know. I just always felt that if somebody is coming to you because you have a certain skill set and you want something from them, whether it's financial or you want to make a name for yourself or you want some publicity, you have to treat them, and I say this, nobody else has said this, not as a client, but as a partner. You are both partners on this project, and you have to treat this other person who legally we call a client, you have to treat them like a partner, as you would any partner. And of course, most lawyers say the most awful things about these people behind closed doors, but that is the truth, and that's how I've always felt. I know just going back to your comments about the person of first impressions, the ambassador of first impressions that you've named that, and I love that. But most lawyers still hand the phone to someone with zero training and call it intake. What would you say to that person who's leaving $1 million on the table because somebody's first impression was just a shrug?
I've gotten to the point in my career where I don't even want to say anything to those people. I've retired. It's my third time I've retired. I'm still not retired. I work with 9 or 10 private clients, and I've run out of what to say to them. When I started Lead Docket, I was using Captora and a couple of other tools, but when we built Lead Docket, it was the hardest thing. When I was representing using Captora, you would try to introduce an accountability system to somebody, and they would be so arrogant as to say, I don't need it. I know what's going on. And again, it's what you don't know. But if you're not running your business with complete authenticity and accountability, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, because all you're doing is throwing stuff against the wall and you're hoping it's going to stick. You heard people write checks and they think they have money in their checkbook because they have extra checks. But if you don't understand in this day and age, the metrics, the intake, the cost of doing business, the cost of a lead, the cost of everything, and manage it, it's such a competitive environment that you're not being competitive. You're leaving millions on the table. I guaranteed when I started Lead Docket, I'm using the word guarantee very loosely because in advertising, you never guarantee. But when we got people going on Lead Docket, we were able to pick up 20 to 35% more business that was falling through the cracks. So in this day and age, there's really two ways to make money in the business. So there's nothing wrong with a lawyer making money, as long as they're doing it professionally and with compassion. The truth of it is, get better cases. How do you do that? Be a good lawyer.
Right.
You can't just say, I only take serious cases. Well,
right.
Everybody thinks the case is serious, and every lawyer says the same thing.
That's correct.
Lawyer.
Yeah.
To treat your people well and understand your metrics. You have to be understanding the financial aspects of your business. Those are the two things. I'll add one more thing. Settling cases. 90% of the lawyers that are out there, in my opinion, sell their clients short. I know how they negotiate. I see it all day long, especially volume firms. When a lawyer says to me, I get every dollar, bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it.
Right.
Another thing that I'm adamant about is preparing your case for trial. If you're not preparing it for trial, you're not preparing it for settlement.
You don't know how the idea of preparation really frustrates me. When I probably did over 1,000 depositions in my life. I don't do them anymore because I don't need to do them anymore, and I'd rather have somebody else do that. But when I prepared a client for the deposition, and the deposition is the most important part of discovery before the trial. And if the client doesn't testify in a meaningful way, it could ruin the entire case, and maybe the case would never make it to trial. Do you know how many lawyers wait until the night before or the day before to prep their client for a deposition? Some people, some lawyers, unbelievably, will actually first prep their client an hour or two before the deposition. Whereas I would probably, in most situations, prep the client a few weeks before and then maybe again a few days before. And it's not an hour. It's 2 hours. It's 2.5 hours.
Well, you
Even
want it
if
to
it's
resonate in their head. You want them to buy into it. Keep in mind, you use the word partner. You guys are partners at that point. I'm going to tell you something, Neal. One of my most iconic clients, I represented them for 35 years. My agency still represents them as the Cochran firm. Dealing with Mr. Cochran was a phenomenal experience in life. So he was diagnosed on a Thursday or Friday with brain tumor, and we had him in the studio the following week for 2 days. And the most repetitive thing that he would say to me, repetitive thing, we got him on film because it was iconic and what have you, is preparation, preparation, preparation. One thing Mr. Cochran did is prepare. And he was prepared to go into court. He was prepared for everything. He over-prepared. And that taught me a major, major lesson.
Yeah.
And look,
and I want to say one other thing, and you could agree with me or not. Not only does the client, you have to be a good lawyer, no question about it. But yes, the client wants somebody that they can trust, that they respect, and that they like, because they have to like you. But most importantly, and in my business, we don't get paid, as you know, by the hour. But many lawyers do get paid by the hour in other types of practices. Clients would be willing to pay more if they thought that the lawyer that they're working with respected them, they liked them, they built a connection, they built a bond. They're willing to pay a premium for that. And somehow lawyers don't get that. Even if you're looking at it from simply a transactional point of view, why wouldn't you treat your client with the utmost professionalism and try to make that real connection?
I think it's a personal issue. And truthfully, you have good people, bad people. I'm not going to say all people that don't treat their clients well are not good people. But the point of it is what's your character and who are you? I remember when you were telling me this story about you dropping out of high school to take care of your mother, I visualized and reaching back because it was so impactful to me. You're standing over your mother as a kid. What can I do for you? What can I do for you? What a tremendous sacrifice you made for your family. And I think lawyers have to either have the right DNA or they don't. It's just like anything else. Look, this country the world has gone downhill on service.
Right.
And,
right.
Service is the most important thing. And the most important thing in a law firm is culture. There's really only one guy out there that's teaching culture, and it's Michael Mogul. Michael's a private client of mine, and he's been with me. I've been with him since the very beginning. And he has planted his pole in the ground on culture. Culture is what we're talking about. A good culture. Now, something happened in your family to have such an explosive culture for you to drop out of high school and tend to your mother who is dying of cancer. Now, come on, man. What kind of culture did you come from? Obviously, a lot of character and a lot of good culture, but culture is everything. Culture starts at the top. And if you don't have good culture and understand culture, look, I have a client in Connecticut. We were talking about this last Friday. They have people knocking at their door wanting to work for them. What? And then the next call you get, I can't find anybody. Well, are you attractive or not attractive?
Right.
I'm talking about looks because you and I have a long ways to go with that. You know what I'm saying here? And everything that we're saying kind of goes into this container of culture. That's where it really begins from the very beginning of our conversation here, I believe.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I really have this. I have this issue with many lawyers who don't get it for one reason or another. I'll tell you something else that really bothers me. Again, I respect your opinion, wherever you fall on this. But when I see a lawyer's website or on a commercial where they scroll down all their verdicts and all their settlements. Now, I could have easily done that over 40 years. I could have easily picked out ones that, and I could have easily made them up too, because at the end of the day, you don't know if somebody's making them up or not. Why do that? Because the only person that gets off on doing that is the lawyer putting it on the screen.
No, I disagree with you.
You ask me. I've been doing this almost 40 years. Ask me how many times a client has come in and said to me, Mr. Goldstein, can you tell me all the verdicts and settlements you've got from cases similar to mine? Nobody.
But let me tell you why I do it. And I can only give you my opinion.
Sure.
What you've asked for.
Sure.
Number one, it is social proof. It's not about ego, but it absolutely drives Google in the right direction for SEO and credibility on the site. Now, how you present that is what we should be talking about. But just to throw, brag about, I got this and I got that. I agree with you 1,000%. But the reason that you put it in the place for it and it should be maybe 2 folds down in a website is the social proof. There's a technical reason for doing that. And it helps your SEO, it helps your credibility, believe it or not. But I don't believe in bragging about it. Look, if you go to a website, I mean, you can go to 100 websites, and 99 of them are going to say, I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that. Absolutely no client centricity. You got to be client centric. It's about the fucking client. Excuse my language. It's about the client. It's not about you, Mr. Lawyer. It's about the client.
I agree with that. In fact, when I have done that, it was basically a post on the website talking about who this person is, what they've done in their lives, and how we handled the case, and what the result is, assuming that we don't have a confidentiality agreement. But just to make a list of cases, and there are other ways you could SEO the same thing without just putting a list of verdicts and settlements, the validity of which no client would ever know or not.
I understand. And you have a very good point. I challenged you on that, and it's only an opinion. It is not a priority on the site. What's a priority on the site is everything on above the fold and how that person comes to that site and what do they see and how do they feel. And if the first thing that you do, or the second thing, or the third, and maybe even the fourth thing you do is talk about money, then all you're doing is transactional. A client comes to you for help. And when they see, I got 5 million, okay, maybe that helps with the credibility and it gives you some kind of history. It is more important or equally important to tell the story behind that 5 million, which is something you just acknowledged. But the most important thing is opening up any kind of an advertising and make it about the client.
So as we wind down, I have a few last questions. One is, you've helped shaped the legal marketing world, and you're documenting it through your Hall of Fame awards. What's the legacy that you want to leave, and what do you hope lawyers actually learn from it?
That's a question nobody's ever asked me. My legacy. I was brought into the Hall of Fame last January with John Morgan. I know John, 35 years. We're very good.
Right.
We know each other. I mean, there's division because of competitiveness and, confidentiality and so on. But I think if I was to be remembered by anything, I would like to be remembered that I helped more people without any strings attached. And I was, I contributed in a decent way without my hand.
I can vouch for that. And we do this with anybody who's been on so far. I've asked them 3 quick questions, and you could answer them in any way that you want. What's the one thing you would tell a young lawyer listening right now, something that could help them stand out as that one lawyer in a world full of lawyer lookalikes?
Be compassionate. Understand that today is the worst day your client has when they call you, or maybe, there's an accident, and treat people the way you want to be treated.
Good enough. And if you could go back to your younger self, maybe in the days that you were surfing, you want to say something to yourself, knowing everything that you know today, what would you say?
I stumbled as a child with a disability, and I still have that disability. I've worked around it, and I'm an advocate for it, dyslexia. I would have really paid more attention. I wasn't diagnosed in early school, but I would have done something to further my education, and I should have become a lawyer.
The last question I have for you, is there someone you've lost personally or professionally who you'd want one more conversation with? And if so, what would you say to them if you had that moment?
Well, of course, there's absolutely no question it'd been my father was a tremendous influence on me. He was a great guy. He passed away about 2-3 years ago. You always want that one more conversation. My friend Marty, he grew up in Oceanside. I grew up, we were friends since we were 9 years old. We rode motorcycles. He rode Harleys when we were 16. I miss Marty tremendously. And I wish I could just have one more conversation with him.
That's great.
I say to him, Marty, we made it.
Yeah.
We're getting
Yeah.
through life.
Yeah. Yeah. Harlan, if there are people, lawyers that want to contact you for your services or want to speak to you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would just simply Google me. Google Harlan Schillinger. I know there's a lot of pages there because I've, obviously been involved with a lot of things. I want to add one more thing.
Sure.
To the lawyers, to everything. Be humble.
That says it in one word, 2 words.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harlan, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to get this going.
Well, the honor is mine. And I have to tell you, I've read your book. I followed you. I immediately was attracted to you and what you've done from the very beginning. And for me to remember all these little details, the very first time we met, I think we were in Chicago, is amazing. I remember it. I'm visualizing the story that you told to the group. Remember when we had to go around the room?
Right, sure.
And Neal, I'm going to tell you something. You don't realize how much you've affected my life. And I really mean it. This is not patronizing. I'm just telling you, I could repeat your story to anyone. And let me tell you something. It's totally inspirational, especially with a guy like me, because you and I relate. We have disabilities. We have things to overcome. I think you and I talked about ADD and talk about other things. Over the years, we've taken those challenges on to become better people. And
yes.
So I'm thanking you for your inspiration to me. And I'm not patronizing you whatsoever. I'm telling you, thank you, sir.
Well, the next time our paths cross, we're going to sit down, have a really good dinner, maybe a glass of wine or beer, whatever, and it'll be a good moment.
I look forward to it.
If something here hits home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Tap subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with a lawyer who needs to really hear it. This is That One Lawyer Podcast. See you next time.